The story starts with two photographers finding the body of a girl by a riverbank, who was brutally murdered. When the police investigate, they find some footprints and a sign of a stick made of wood, and they realize that the killer walks with the support of a stick. And that's when we see forensic Dr. Kong, who is about to retire soon, and we call them forensic doctors who research the dead body and determine the cause of death. Here, the Dr. Kong becomes famous throughout the police force because all murder cases come to him, and the girl named Mansu also used to study in the doctor's class at one time. Here we see that one hand of the dead body is missing, and the girl who was killed used to work at a bar. During the autopsy, the doctor praises the girl's body and says, "How can someone kill such a beautiful girl? Because her body is very perfect, and why would anyone do this with such a beautiful body?" Here, Mansu was also showing more interest in the case compared to other officers. She tells all the officers that the killer definitely wants to give us some sign. There must be a reason behind cutting the body in this way. But the belief of the other officer was that the girl was cut like this for no reason. However, Dr. Kong says that there is always some reason behind every crime. And here we find out that the girl was attacked with a heavy object on her head, and some particles of cement are also found on her body, indicating that she was killed at a cement plant. Now, the police were questioning the girl's boyfriend, but he didn't have any answers either. As the police searched for the girl's other hand near the cement plant where she was attacked, they noticed that some people were protesting near that cement plant, against the construction of the plant and its impact on the river. The protesters believed that building a cement plant on that river would destroy its beauty, and the homes of many people living along the riverbank would be taken away. And here we see that the police find the second hand of that girl Ian. After that, Mansu comes to Kong, where Kong tells her that the girl's hand was rotated in 3 places: cement plant, soil, and water. All 3 indicate that there must be a big reason behind this. And now, after doing some research, Mansu prepares her report, where she states that the government has given the river Q the status of the goddess of beauty, and here the government will also cut the river and end its beauty. But this is something people can't digest, after which protests against the government begin. And the leader of those protesters, Lee, is also a fan of Venus, and has mentioned Venus in his book. Here Mansu believes that Lee must have killed that girl to stop the work, so that he can send a message to the government. There is also evidence to prove that Lee must have killed the girl named Ian, because he also walks with a stick. And there is a mark of a stick with his shoes at the crime scene. Based on this evidence, Lee is arrested. On the other hand, Kong retires from his job, and he used to live with his daughter, who went to another country. She informed Kong on the phone that she would be arriving in South Korea in a few days. When Kong goes to pick her up at the airport, a man hands him some documents and runs away. The documents contain photos of Kang's kidnapped daughter. Kang's daughter was supposed to surprise Kong by coming to South Korea first, but the kidnappers abducted her. Meanwhile, Lee also confesses in front of Mansu that yes, he indeed killed that girl. Mansu was quite happy to solve the case, and she calls Kong to inform him that she has solved the case, and the killer is not someone else but Lee. The rapid confession of the killer was troubling Kong. The killer confessed so quickly, indicating that he might be the real culprit. And somewhere in his mind he was thinking that Lee might have kidnapped his daughter, because Kong didn't have enmity with anyone. Perhaps due to this case, the killer kidnapped his daughter to save himself. Therefore, Kong goes to Lee, and Lee confesses to Kong that yes, he has his daughter, and within 3 days, he will prove his innocence and be released. But before that, Kong tells Lee that he has confessed to his crime. But it doesn't matter to Lee. He reveals how he killed Yun and dismembered her. He starts telling Kong these details, and he says that when he was doing this, Kang's daughter was very scared. And if you want to see her alive, get him out of there quickly. And now, to save his daughter, Kong accepts Lee's offer. Then Mansu tells Kong that the weapon with which Lee killed the girl, they have found that weapon too. And there was a lot of blood on it. Soon they will also receive its report. Now Kong and his junior were preparing the evidence against Lee. Kong's job was to clean the bloodstains and fingerprints from the weapon. Kong was very scared because what happened with Yun could also happen with his daughter. Therefore, out of fear, Kong made a small cut on his dog's body with the knife, took its blood and applied it on that knife, so that the evidence ends there. Along with this, Kong tries to convince Mansu that Lee might be innocent. So please wait for the report to come. Here, Kong wants to cast doubt in Mansu's mind about Lee, so that it is easier to save Lee. Now in jail, Kong starts to attack Lee, telling him that he wants to talk to his daughter. Then Lee calls his daughter, who was very scared. Now listening to his daughter's voice, Kong becomes even more scared, because his daughter's life is at stake. And if anything happens to his daughter, he can never forgive himself. Now the report on the weapon found against Lee comes out negative, because there was a dog's blood on the weapon. Now the police go to Lee's house to search for the real weapon, with which Lee murdered Yun. On the other hand, Kong goes to Yun's house, hoping to get some information, where he meets her friend, who tells Kong about Yun's boyfriend Young, which might provide some information, but Kong finds nothing. However, Kong finds a photo of Lee's brother from Lee's house, who was the same person he met at the airport. Meanwhile, the police reach Lee's house, but in haste, Kong forgets his surgical knife there, which the police officer picks up. Then they find a large rod from Lee's house, which they take as evidence. Now Mansu reaches Kang's house, so that she can quickly get Lee's report, because Kong had been delaying it for quite some time. Suddenly she sees Kang's dog injured, so she takes it to the doctor, who tells Mansu that the dog wasn't actually injured, but was cut with a surgical knife. This strange revelation puzzles Mansu, and then Kong goes to Lee's other house, where Lee's brother lives. And upon entering the house, he finds some old case files, where a girl was gang raped, and the blame was put on the girl, where the girl was falsely accused. And Kong realizes why Lee chose him, and we will find out more about it later. Along with this, Kong sees heaps of photos of himself and his daughter, indicating that this planning had been going on for a long time. Suddenly, Kang's attention is drawn to Lee's brother, who beats Kong and tells him to focus on releasing Lee, and then his daughter will be returned to him. Meanwhile, at the police station, police officers were discussing that they found a surgical knife from Lee's house, which means, along with writing books, Lee is also a doctor. And now, upon hearing the name of the surgical knife, Mansu starts to suspect Kong, because Kong was in the lab before the report of the weapon came, and there was dog blood on that weapon, while Kang's dog was injured on the other side. And Mansu starts to deeply suspect Kong, upon finding the knife from Lee's house. After this, she checks Kang's background, where more aspects of the story come to light, where many years ago Lee's sister was gang raped. But all three boys were from a wealthy family, so they didn't receive any punishment, because all the evidence had already been erased. And in court, it was proved that Lee's sister's character wasn't good. And talking about her autopsy report, Kong had also manipulated it, because his daughter was very ill at the time, and needed a lot of money for treatment. So Kong tampered with the report. And now after knowing all this, Mansu talks to Kong, and tells him that she is going to arrest him for tampering with evidence in a crime. But now Kong tells her everything, that his daughter is in Lee's custody, and Kong requested Mansu to give him a few days' time. And now after knowing this, Mansu is completely shocked, meaning that, to seek revenge for his sister, Lee did all of this to Kong. And now to save Lee, Kong seeks help from Ian's friend. There, she traps Ian's boyfriend, and hands over his fingerprints and sperm to Kong, where Kong places that sperm and fingerprints on Ian's body. Then a fake report is prepared, based on which Ian's boyfriend Young is arrested. And now there was no evidence against Lee, so the senior officers released Lee. As soon as Lee is released, Mansu receives the real report, and the dark secrets of the story come to light, such as the people who raped Lee's sister were killed in small accidents, and Ian was the same girl who had given false testimony against Lee's sister. Here, Lee's father had also pleaded a lot to Kong, saying that my daughter is not like that, as was told in court. Please help me. But at that time Kong didn't help them, because he was also helpless. But seeing the world in that form, hatred and revenge sparked in Lee's mind, and the desire for revenge turned Lee and his brother into demons. Maybe Kong would have told Mansu earlier that Lee has kidnapped his daughter, so maybe all these problems wouldn't have occurred, and maybe the police would have found his daughter, and Lee would have been punished. But at that time Kong could not see anything except his daughter, because he loves his daughter very much. and apart from his daughter, he has no one else in this world. And now here, Mansu also manages to find Lee's other house, where Kong had seen Lee's other brother. And when she reaches his house, Lee's brother tries to attack Mansu, but Mansu manages to defend herself and somehow succeeds in killing him. Meanwhile, Kong arrives at Lee's house, demanding his daughter, but Lee tells him that he's late. And Kong, upon listening to this, he starts beating Lee, and says, "Whatever you said to me, I did it. Now leave my daughter alone." And now after getting beaten, Lee says that his daughter is in his other house. When Kong arrives at Lee's other house, Mansu tries to stop him and warns him not to go inside. But Kong enters the house without understanding anything. Inside he finds his daughter dead. And there Lee had recorded a message, where Kang's daughter begged for help. And after that Lee killed her. When Kong talked to her daughter in jail, it was just a recording. But the story doesn't end here. Now what Kong is about to see will make any father commit suicide. Because there he sees his daughter's head, hands and feet only. The body he thought was Ian's was actually his own daughter's. Only the head, hands and feet belonged to Ian, and Lee had cut them in such a way that no one would know, not even Kong himself. During the autopsy, when Kong was praising that body, and conducting the autopsy on it, he wasn't examining the girl Ian's body, but his own daughter's. Remembering these details, Kang's soul trembles, unable to understand how he can kill himself. At that moment Lee comes up to Kong and says, "Once the heart is wounded, a person can endure it. But painful memories and the desire for revenge haunt a person every day. And from today onwards, Kong, you will also live with this burden. Just as I lived, you treated my sister unfairly. And just like my sister, your daughter was suffering before her death. And it was quite difficult to kill her. Even while dying, she kept saying one thing: my father will never forgive you." Listening to Lee's words, Kong feels how much pain his daughter endured. And Kong could not bear Lee's words. And he shoots Lee and then shoots himself too. After all, it's harder to forgive someone than to die, because it takes a very long time to alleviate the pain. And by that time the pain only increases. And with that, the movie ends here. So now let's talk about why didn't Lee kill Kong only, when he had killed everyone? So the matter is very simple. Kong didn't love his own life much. His whole life was only his daughter. That's why then Lee made such a big plan, and gave Kong the biggest punishment in the world. Because according to Lee, a doctor is another form of God. But since Kong didn't deliver justice, Lee punished him in this way. And then, in the end, he brings himself before Kong and lets Kong kill him. Because somewhere, he feels guilty for killing Kang's daughter. Because Kang's daughter was innocent, and Kong himself felt guilty for not delivering justice to Lee's sister. If he had done so, his daughter wouldn't have met such a tragic fate today. How did you find this movie? Do let me know in the comments. I'll see you with another new story. Until then, goodbye.